Welcome to Boundless Pursuit, a weekly podcast providing motivation, entertainment, and education to anglers and outdoorsmen. I hope that the stories you'll find here will encourage you to chase your passion more fervently, to open your mind to new opportunities and perspectives. Your engagement and feedback is critical to the growth of this show, and I would love to hear your suggestions on topics or potential guests. You can reach me at boundlesspursuitfishing@gmail.com or at my website, www.boundless-pursuit.com. That's where you'll find all related articles, media, and merchandise. Please remember, the show will gain traction from your support. Be sure to like, comment, and share this podcast to your friends and connections. I'm your host, David Graham. Now let's get on to today's episode. You know, nothing in the fish world engages the conscience quite like a shark. And it's nice to gloat over an 8-pound bass or our personal best catfish or those mystery fish that got away. But shark anglers exist in a totally different category of fishermen. Because when you get to the point as an angler that you're pursuing something that can and quite frankly has eaten people, you are fishing in unparalleled territories. And while that's probably a sensationalized way of thinking about sharks, the reality is a lot less ominous. But still, there's always those hairs that stand on the back of your neck when a giant chunk of meat is dropped in the ocean and that clicker starts sounding off in the darkness of the night. And there are just few experiences as stimulating as encountering a monster shark with your feet planted in the sand. And my guest today is Blake Avery Brown, and this dude catches some giants. And he's oftentimes doing it completely alone or with his girlfriend or just a small crew. And while some of these experiences come from the thrill of chasing an adrenaline rush, Blake took time during this conversation to push smart shark handling and having a proper game plan that's going to ensure the safety of the fish and the longevity of the sport. And the land-based shark fishing culture is in a really weird conundrum where catches are subject to extreme public scrutiny and a very real possibility of legal ramification. And while it's fun to sit and tell big fish stories, Blake takes time to highlight the best practices that are going to ensure that the sport is done right and has longevity. And I think that that's just the most important tone of the conversation with regards to land-based shark fishing. And I think Blake does a really good job of telling it right. This is Blake Avery Brown, Georgia land-based shark fisherman. All right. I think we're all set up. So Blake Brown, Good to meet you sort of in person, actually be talking to you. Man, I was looking through your pictures and it was like freaking me the hell out. Like the sharks that you're pulling and, oh man, I don't even know where to begin with it because, you know, a lot of times I'm sure you've got a crew, you know what I mean? I know a lot of these land-based shark guys have like, you know, kind of like a crew. It's like a team effort because it gets to a point when you start harnessing yourself and strapping yourself into this gear, you got the real possibility of getting dragged in, but
yeah,
seen a few pictures where your partner is presumably your girlfriend. Like, what's up? What's going on there?
Actually, she met me through shark fishing. She lived in town, but
so romantic.
So moved from Kentucky, where she had never seen like saltwater fishing or anything, and so us kind of meeting each other was having to do with a sand tiger that I caught in Georgia, actually, which she thought was awesome, and she quickly picked up the hobby as well as I did when I first started. So it's pretty awesome. Yeah, I do have a crew, but in the last year, it's mainly been me and her.
Well, that's pretty cool, and it's interesting. Like, where was she browsing to find shark pictures? I make it sound like it's crazy, but believe it or not, my wife, it was sort of similar with us. We started out doing land-based shark fishing together, fishing for alligator gar. My thing was like, I told her from the get-go, I was like, hey, listen, I'm like the worst. I've not had a lot of relationships because I isolate myself so badly with this fishing stuff. I mean, I was like, you know, I'm cool with hanging out, but just know, like, if you want to join me, it sucks. Like it's not always fun. You're gonna be covered in blood and nasty shit. Like
gnats.
but she's been a beast about it. She was a beast about it, and so we'd go shark fishing, and ironically, her maiden name is Sharky. So
Wow.
she's been good. She'll paddle the baits out. She does it all. So she'll jump in there and leader the fish and slap the tail rope on. But it's been a while since we've been able to do it together. It's just life has gotten busy, but that's
Yeah.
pretty awesome. But yeah, dude, man, I don't know where to begin. Like y'all shark guys are always an interesting one to me because it's like, you never just that's never anybody's starting point. So I guess just walk me through like how did you end up finding your like and first and foremost, where are you located and how did you find yourself like getting into this whole land-based shark scene?
Okay, so for location, I'll just say Jekyll Island because I
Yeah,
guess
don't give any spot burns here, but
no,
just
no,
like
I'm not. I won't give any spot burns, but I guess you could just say I'm a local of Jekyll Island. That's primarily where I would fish.
where is that? Is that
Um,
it's Georgia, right?
it's the most public barrier island in Georgia, a southern barrier island. Cumberland would be the most southern, but it's a private owned island, so you can't actually get to it without a ferry. So Jekyll would be the furthest south in the state of Georgia.
Okay.
But I guess the how I really got into it would be my older brothers. They would always, like just that was their way of having fun when we were like younger, and they were fairly older than I was, 4 or 5 years.
Mm.
And so I went out there one day with a little 6,000 spinning reel and casted a chunk of mullet, and I hooked a tarpon, which was, I mean, I want to say it was over 100 pounds, but it was so long ago I can't really remember. But that day I was hooked to it, and I kept going back to that same spot, fishing the same area, and just learning over time how to change how I fish and when I fish.
Yeah. I feel like that's an easy introductory or like if you want to like have a surefire way to get a kid into fishing or interested, go down to the beach and throw a chunk of meat out there because like they can play in the sand and build sand castles like while waiting they don't you're not going to
Yeah.
get a kid's not going to get bored at the beach
No.
whether dig a damn hole to China for all I care, but it's like
Yeah.
but then the opportunity of what might be caught is like probably a little more fascinating than bluegill at the nearby pond with some worms. So
Yeah.
I can kind of relate. We grew up, or at least part of my life in South Carolina was the same way. And my dad, like he was big into it was just, surf cast and spin gear and throw a chunk of mullet out there. And like, hell, anything can happen. A big stingray. Like I thought that was fun. But
Yeah.
you said you got older brothers. How many brothers you got? Are you the
Oh
youngest?
well. Yeah, I am. No, I have a younger stepbrother, but my
Okay.
my oldest brother is about 3 years older than I am. So I'm 26. He is 29, soon to be 30. And
Okay.
then my older stepbrother is 28.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, see, I can kind of relate. I'm the youngest of three brothers, and it's like my older brother's about almost 3 years older than me, and then my oldest brother's 3 years older than him. But so it's sort of the same thing. There was like a good structure in place for mentorship. I mean, sometimes
Yeah.
it also meant getting your ass kicked. So I don't know.
Yeah,
It's like the low guy on the totem, but that's
definitely.
cool. Well, man, like if you're one of your first fish you hooked was a freaking tarpon, I guess on a 6,000 size reel, I guess
Yeah.
that's a good way to be like, oh my gosh, I've got to come back here every day and do the exact kind of fishing with the exact bait in this exact spot for the rest of my life.
Right. Right.
But at some point you ended up, I guess, encountering sharks. I mean, when
So
did that part start?
we were actually going for sharks this night. Uh and we lost the tarpon, and later that night I did catch my first shark on that same reel. It was, I don't know, 4 or 5 foot sandbar shark,
Hmm.
and it was just so awesome, and I had to keep doing it, man. I was hooked.
Even that, like, I don't know. I mean, I'm not the most well versed shark guy. Certainly not compared to
Yeah.
what I've seen out of yours, but I've got enough experience with some of the sandbar sharks. Like a 6,000 size reel, even with a 4 or 5 foot sandbar shark, that's tough. Like those
Yeah.
bastards fight good, I guess, compared to like I don't know. I've caught lemon sharks, bull sharks, and I think that's pretty much the extent of mine. Bull sharks, lemon sharks, black tips, and then like little, like the smaller, like sharp nose sharks and
Mhm.
the little small ones. But I always thought the sandbars were one of the better fighters. So
They definitely are. One of the, for their pound in class, that they fight harder than just about any other shark of their size.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. So then you like, what is it? So you catch that, and then is it like an automatic reaction for you to think, okay, well, what's the next? How do what's the next size up? How do we keep running with this thing?
Well, actually, I didn't. I wasn't like. I mean, I was hooked, but I didn't have the means to travel by myself. And so it kind of just became like when my brothers would go, I would go. And
Yeah.
sometimes they wouldn't bring me along. So that was a good period of time from that one trip to when I got my driver's license. And I had my buddy from school that I'd known for a long time who I had found out shark fished on Jekyll Island, which I didn't know that before then. And then
Mhm.
me and him started going. And I was like, yo, I know this spot that I went to. Like, we should go try it out. And it just kind of, it really took off from there. I think that
Yeah,
was 2015 or 2016.
that's always an interesting one to me. Like that group of fishermen, it's like there's got to be some level of mentorship because, like, especially when you make the leap from like surf casting with spin gear to the point that you start upgrading the hardware and throwing out like bigger conventional gears, and you got to start harnessing into the rods or kayaking baits out. Like, I feel like that's a hard one to just jump into without somebody else there that's like already in the scene that brings you in. Like, did you have a guy like that, or was it all just like
Oh,
look it up and try to do it yourself? Like, what was the learning
well,
process building there?
not necessarily. I mean, when I first really started going with my friend, after the years passed of my brothers, he had a fairly a good bit of more knowledge than I did in shark fishing, and so I learned a lot about making rigs and
Mhm.
like the bait usage, how to hook your bait, and stuff like that from him. But it was kind of a learning experience for both of us because when I first started fishing with him, it was straight mono, 200-pound mono, like a cheap
Mhm.
mustad, I think a 13-0 hook, and we were frequently hooking fish on cast outs that we could not catch.
Yeah.
We were just getting our asses handed to us. We couldn't handle it.
Yeah, so it was pretty much to upgrade your gear, like because
Yeah,
it's like failing until you get it right. Right?
yeah,
But
big time.
yeah, because that was like a world that I kind of always was interested in, but it's like, man, at some point you almost can't do it by yourself. Like you have to have the partner. But I also know it's like
Right.
a lot of the guys aren't that willing to open up to you. You know what I mean? It's like
Hmm.
I don't know. He's like a lot of skeptical folks in that world. But but that's an interesting one. Like the bait thing too. It's like even just getting the adequate size bait. I mean, are you one of the guys that was walking piers and bumming bait off of people, or were you go out and get like harvesting your own bait? Like how do you even begin getting the bait you need? Or are you just like gig and raise or what?
Yeah, well, it's gonna sound silly. I'm actually really close friends with the guys that own a store in town called City Market,
Okay.
and I would go to them at the end of the day, and I would take all of their fish fillet that was left over or carcass,
Hmm.
so like whiting heads, mullet heads, snapper heads, and stuff like that. And I guess just it led to catching like fish in the surf, such as like stingrays and redfish and trout, and using that for bait to find out like this is what is prey. The predators go for these fish that we're catching on these baits that we get from the market, and we just kind of learned from there. Like you learn from your surroundings, and so what
Yeah.
we're catching on the rods is what we ended up using for bait, and yeah.
Yeah, that's what I've kind of figured out in some of the shark stuff I've done myself, or even like playing with the Goliath grouper. It's like, damn, I got to get bait if I want to do this. And it's like you get real good at bumming bait off of obscure places. Like I've done the same thing, local fish markets. Some of those guys are perfectly happy to give you the heads and the scraps for free because they're just going to throw them out, or the stuff
Yeah.
that's about to expire, like expire per, I don't know, like USDA regulatory expiration. But it's like a shark will be perfectly happy to eat that thing you're about to throw out. Or I wouldn't. I've seen even like Craigslist ads by people, like the wanted ads. I saw a wanted ad one time by a guy looking to bum bait off of people. But that's funny. So, do you got like a freezer in the garage where you're keeping all this stuff? You got to have your own
um
designated bait freezer.
I actually have three now.
Better than me because I piss my wife off and I'm mixing bait in with the food. Like,
Yeah, yeah. I don't think my girlfriend would be happy if I did that.
and then some of mine's been in there for like a year and a half. I'm like, I don't know if I can use this anymore.
Yeah.
But that's funny. But um, so the thing that like kind of like made me, I don't know, the thing about your page that took me back, because when I saw your stuff on Facebook and then Instagram, I was like, my God, like here's some big tiger sharks and things like that. But the crazy thing for me is the photos where you're holding spin gear. Now, are you like, did you get to a point where, well, I mean, what is the story with that? Like, are you intentionally catching them with spin gear as like a challenge, or are these just like crazy accidents where everything worked out for you? Because, dude, I'm telling you, like just actually this past Saturday, I went fishing with a guy. We were throwing plugs, we were throwing poppers off of the jetties in Palm Beach because I wanted to catch these big jacks. And but this time of year, all the black tips are migrating through. So I kind of wanted to do that too. I wanted to catch. I never caught a black tip or any shark on an artificial lure, and didn't get any jacks, but I did get my first black tip on a popper. But I was just like, my God, these things are such a pain in the ass on spin gear. Just a black tip. So then when I look at your picture, I don't know what size reel that is or what the gear like capabilities are, but what is the biggest shark you've caught on spin gear? Because that one tiger, I was like, oh my God, how the hell did he pull that off?
That tiger shark is the biggest. That was 11'3" or 11'4", just right around that mark. But I mean, just we called it 11 plus, just because we didn't really take too much time to straighten the fish out or anything. We were just trying to work fast. We've actually hooked several fish that I believe would be up to par with that fish, or maybe even larger. Like I said, starting out with a Fierce 6000, like the original Fierce, and a 10-foot pin rod, losing fish, whether getting spooled or busting off or not long enough leader or not using cable. We just slowly adapted to the next fish we lost. So if we lost this fish, we figured out why, and we upgraded to prevent that from happening more. And I think what really drew the line with that fish is we hooked I believe 3 fish within a week that would pretty much take like more than 200 yards of line off of a spinning reel, and we were using tight drag, and we were thinking that the bust offs were us using too much pressure, so we upgraded to like hollow core braids, like 80s and 100s, to find out we're still getting popped off by fish. So after speaking to some people, and even Spencer Wonder, the guy you hosted, has given me a lot of knowledge in this.
Yeah.
Sharks' tails are really, really strong and sharp with the skin. So they were just longer than the 9-foot leaders that we were used to throwing. So a top shot prevented is pretty much the reason we caught that fish. I'd put about 10 foot of 100-pound mono, and it changed a lot for us as far as like how big a fish we can catch.
Yeah, because I feel like that's the challenge, at least that I've run into when I've done spin gear. I'll do a little bit of that every year on where I'm at in Southwest Florida. We have like somewhat of a migration of the sandbar sharks that comes through. So it's like a lesser known shark migration that, it's a lot of fun. It's always in the wintertime. We get them and they come through in these big waves, but I like playing with them with the spin gear. I always fish like the north side of Sanibel, which I can't do it this year because the hurricane destroyed it. Because you don't have to cast too far out and you're in pretty deep water. So it's like, it's perfect for spin gear because you don't have to get the baits way out there. But yeah, you're right. It's like your leader material has to be long enough. So it's like, how are you getting that much mono into through the guides and everything? I mean, what kind of knots are you running? I
would tie an FG knot from my braid to my mono, and being that I use a 12-foot surf rod, St. Croix specifically is what I run on all my spinning gears. About 10 foot of mono, and it does make a little bit of a noise when you cast it, but Georgia has a pretty unique fishery. So the channels, like you said, we can cast pretty deep with a simple lob, but I think that the depth here doesn't really make much of a difference as it would say in Florida, because you paddle your bait out to 15, 20 foot of water. But here, I think that the fish are more or less coming into the tide pools to feed on bait. So that tiger shark ate at a flood tide, a full moon. And so the water that I think the bait was sitting in was less than 5 foot deep.
And what did it eat? Because I guess that's the other side. Like when I see a shark that big closing in on 12 feet, on spin gear. I'm
Nice.
like, well, what the hell did you cast out there? Like, did he take a small bait or did you cast a giant bait? Or are you one of them guys that paddles out with spin gear?
Oh no, no. I actually we can hop into that after this.
Okay.
I'm not a huge fan of people who kayak spinning reels.
Yeah.
We have a lot of bull redfish here and also slots. And so what I did was just take like the head and remnants of a fillet and I casted it out. Well, it was towards the end of the year, November, so we're like scarce on bait. And so what I did was I froze the fish after using it and then unthawed it and froze it again and unthawed it again. And
Yeah.
it worked the third time, which is kind of crazy.
What's funny about that is you're cutting the head off of a fish that like a lot of people hold up on this pedestal. It's like this
Yeah.
great sport fish. Chop
Well,
its
it
head
was a
off.
slot. It
Yeah.
was a slot fish, but it was upper slot. It had a fairly good size head on it.
Yeah, that's one of the things I never even know. I don't even know the legality of that in like where I'm at. If I caught a slot redfish, I would assume I'm not even allowed to do that.
Oh
But
wow.
I probably sent things out that I don't know if I was supposed to either. So
I mean, yeah,
other
everybody's done
sharks.
their fair bit of wrong.
I know I've used sheep's head in the past, and people are like, "What the hell are you doing? Sending out dinner, like a good eating fish for bait?" I'm like, I've had great luck using sheep's head as shark bait for some reason.
I've
But
heard it's good.
yeah, I did. It was one night I would like run low on bait, so I just started throwing a cast net, and I started catching these. I mean, monster sheep's head right off. I was cast netting them out of the surf. I was like, "Oh hell yeah!" And people are like, "Why are you wasting a good sheep's head for shark bait? I ain't got nothing else."
Yeah, right.
But yeah, that's freaking nuts. So this like, I mean, I don't know. Are you just like gambling on the direction that this thing is running? I mean, how do you torque down enough to contain a shark like? Are you having to like? Because I wouldn't think you'd have the like torque to bring it in fast, but I know that like also like kind of the name of the game with those bigger sharks is to be working fast and to like
Yeah.
minimize the amount of time. I mean, have you run into any kind of criticism? It seems like the shark community likes to criticize every little. I'm even too scared. I told Spencer the same thing. I'm like, dude, I won't even go into those full like message boards with my Rudy Poo ass rigs to get like criticized. But I would think like have you run into like any kind of hate on people like, what are you doing fucking around with a big shark with a spin gear, like, you know, prolonging the fight or any of that?
Yeah, definitely my fair share of hate from other anglers. It's mainly people from Florida who experience a different set of regulations and fishery as us. We have our channels aren't very wide. Specifically, where I'm fishing at, we have about I think it's 1,600 yards wide in the channel, which seems like a lot, but the
Yeah.
deepest point of that is about 300 yards out. So a fish might look like it's about to spoil you, and you could have a lot of drag on it. But when it gets to that deep part in the current, the fish struggles to fight anymore. So it's
Yeah.
more of a it gets out there and then it's just back and forth, slowly working its way back in.
And are you like, I mean, I don't know, on a typical day of shark fishing, I don't know if it's different on spin gear or paddling out, but I mean, are you hoping for certain tides, or are there like certain conditions you look for, like, or is it just like we're going on whatever day I'm available and we'll stick it out there and sit on the chunk for 12 hours and we'll work all the tides?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's obviously the moments where we have nothing else to do, so we just fish randomly, but there
Mhm.
is a set schedule. So our beaches are relatively flat, and I mean like 2 to 3 foot for 200 yards or so. And so you kind of have to figure out your beaches, the tide pools. If it's a high tide, you want to fish somewhere where you know the water is going to be moving less than like if you go fish a spot and the water is going to come up from 100 yards out. You don't want to fish there for an incoming, you know.
Yeah.
So you got to know your beaches and know your environment to really catch the fish with a schedule here. But you can always catch them randomly, for sure.
Yeah, it's funny you describe that. Like I remember the beaches may be more similar, and like where I fished a lot coming up was in South Carolina around Charleston. I know
Yeah.
a lot of our beaches were like that. It was like it's nothing like what we see here on the Gulf Coast. Like the beaches look completely different. And like I remember around like Sullivan's Island and that kind of area, it was like you could step on the sand and you still got to walk 300 yards across sand before you get to the water at like
Yeah.
low tides. Like, good God, the beaches are so big and vast. So it was totally different. It was the same thing too. There was like tide pools.
Yep.
So like we would fish only like the incoming tides for whatever reason seemed to work best. But I'm just not well versed enough to know how that affects much. But I am always interested though in like people's rigging and stuff. Like people that listening whose experience is not in shark fishing. Like run me through like I don't know I would say from spool, like from backing all the way to the hook. What like what the progression of your leader looks like, because I know you got like backing and then you got top shot and then you got leader and then like why each thing is critical. I'd say this is more related to like a big conventional reel.
This is actually a Slammer 8500 DX.
Okay.
And so I have 80-pound diamond hollow, like from the arbor, completely filled. And I don't know if you can see this still. Hold on. So this right here would be my 130-pound mono.
Okay.
And for about, I'd say 10 foot of mono, just for that tail whip, I have an FG knot.
Yep.
And from my leader, I would just simply swivel 400-pound mono to a snap swivel. And it's really important to use a fixed sinker in Georgia because the currents are very strong here. Like it's like Sebastian Inlet type strong.
Yeah.
And so if you have a moving sinker, then your bait is going to be all over the place in the water.
You mean like a slide, like on a slider or whatever?
Yeah, like a sliding snap swivel.
What kind of like? What lead are you throwing? Like pyramid sinkers or the little grappling hook style ones, or?
Yeah. So we do use the pyramids. I've tried the legs here, but every time I do, they pick up a tree branch or something.
Oh, okay.
And you hardly even reel them in when you use them.
And you might have said it, and I just zoned out. Are you using wire, or is it just a straight mono leader?
It's about 7 foot of mono to about 3 foot of cable, which I use 2.2 millimeter for mono and cable. Just it makes it easier to buy sleeves for my rigs.
And is that like coated? Is that coated cable or just like bare cable?
Yes, sir. It's coated.
And what's the benefit of that? Like, I mean, because I know some people use like hard wire with like a what do you call it? A haywire twist or whatever.
Yeah. I've used wire. And it kind of comes down to like a personal kind of preference, I guess. I actually stuck a piece of rebar into the dirt one day, and I made a rig with a piece of wire just going around the eye of my hook, and I would kind of run my line around the rebar and grab the main line portion and snatch it around the rebar as if you're setting the hook. And I found that the cable being like fixed, or some people would call it a snell, around the shank of the hook would catch that rebar way more than the wire and a swinging circle hook would. And so a lot of people prefer wire with a hook that does swing, but not me. I like mine in line.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's always fun to hear like the different ways people do it and like their ideas on it. And even like I said this past weekend, the guy I was fishing with, at one point we started throwing chunks for the black tips just because, hell, we were just screwing around. Yeah. And I had hard wire on mine, and then he had just a straight mono. Like he had just straight mono leader.
Oh wow!
And his baits kept getting picked up. Mine weren't. We're fishing right beside each other. I'm like, well, he was like adamant. It was like the black tips here will not pick up wire. I'm like, what the hell? Like, are they really that? Yeah. So I was like, that's kind of interesting. There's something to it, but I just don't have it. Like, I don't have the guts to run straight mono leader on a shark. I feel like it's.
Oh, me either.
Like, there's no way. He's like, you got to coat it with something.
Well, you also have a lot of clarity down there. And in Georgia, our water is like South Carolina. It looks kind of like Yoo-hoo, like a chocolate milk.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, because where we were fishing was very clear water, like where we were at in Palm Beach, especially that night. It was like really clear. So, yeah, you're probably right. But, I'm still one of those, and I'm still in that novice mindset that like the bloodthirsty sharks, like if they smell blood, they're going to eat. But
yeah.
It's funny how it's funny how you start to learn, like, I don't know, you like dispel those myths. But And I always wonder too, like I noticed some of your pictures, a lot more of your pictures than maybe some people's, like you're out there in the daytime. Have you had like any issues or encounters with beach goers? I don't know. Sometimes they don't like to see
Mm,
that come up on the sand, but
yeah, there's a we have piers on St. Simon's and Jekyll Island, which are heavily crowded, and we do have a big community of shark fishermen that like to net their sandbars and lemons onto the piers. And so, if you are one of those guys, then you're definitely going to be receiving a lot of hate. But
Mhm.
the glorious thing about Jekyll is that it's a pay to entrance, mostly like elderly people, retirement homes, and a lot of tourist attraction versus like Airbnbs and houses and residential areas like St. Simon. So we don't get a lot of people where we fish at all.
Yeah, that's funny. You mentioned the people who pull them up on piers. Like, hell, it's better. I guess a drop. Are you talking about they put a drop net down for them?
Yeah,
I guess
yeah.
it's better than you see the images where people are just straight up, like cranking.
By the
They're
line.
literally dangling from
Yeah,
there, and then they have the audacity to release them from
yeah.
40 feet in the air. So,
Right. It's a belly
man,
flop into the water.
that doesn't help. But
Nope.
good grief. Yeah, that's interesting. So. Man, yeah, the spinning gear one for the tigers. That was, and then you got the sand tiger sharks too, which is different. I've never caught. Now those are always a cool looking one. Was
Yeah.
that also? I saw your photo where you're catching this on spin gear, the sand tigers. What's the difference there? I've heard like maybe that's a little probably maybe easier. I don't know if I've heard
Yeah.
much about the way they fight. I mean, was that
It
Georgia as well?
Yeah, that was all. That was at the same spot I caught that tiger shark. It's that spot is definitely my favorite. That I actually it's kind of off track, but that fish ate at the same tide and moon phase that the tiger shark did. It was
Hmm.
just a different time of year and different climate of water, a different kind of bait. But it was the same tide, same moon, same kind of ordeal. The fish kind of nibbled for nearly 30 minutes, I want to say, and I finally just went down and snatched. I got really lucky because the hook went like the cable was around one of its folded back teeth, like their teeth kind of lay down in their mouth,
Yeah.
and then the hook went back around the cable, so it was just lassoed around a single tooth,
Oh
and
my
the hook
gosh.
it wasn't hooked at all, but the handle on my reel snapped off during the fight, and so I was using my palm like this. It was only about 5 or 10 minutes,
I was
but
about to
it
say
was
that's a pain.
it was stressful.
Yeah, because I know they got one of the gnarliest looking mouths out of all of them. They're always the ones that are like in all the aquariums. I guess they must
Oh yeah.
do better in aquariums. But is that a protected? Is that another one of the protected species too, or no?
Yeah, they're federally protected, so
Okay,
you can't actually harvest them or procrastinate with a
right.
release on them.
Because
But
I think
people do all the time.
that's another interesting part of the topic because I know that like that's a big thing with the shark guys. Like if you want to ruin your sport, you'll
Mhm.
end up being the guy that's
Yeah,
responsible for wash ups. So it's like it's always
yeah.
like real critical to get in and get out and like get the process done. So, sort of I guess explain to me like your process for a release because it's like I know at the same time you got to preserve your own safety, but you're also trying to move
Right.
quickly. Like what kind of gear like or like tools or like the tools of the trade for a quick release and like just the process of bringing in a fish working quickly and getting them out. Do you have like a system in place?
So I mean, I do have pliers, bolt cutters, and stuff like that, but I guess you could call me more of a realist, where I believe if you're not, getting your hands dirty and really putting yourself at risk with
Mm-hmm.
nature, then you're not doing it the right way. And that's just my opinion. Everybody thinks differently, but let's just I would go for my hand before any tool, and I feel like that's worked better for me than anything else. And if I get bit, I just it's a learning experience. I got to be
Yeah.
faster next time.
Yeah, those videos always like spook me out. I mean, I've done the same thing with the sharks where you're like right up in there, but some of them guys are
Yeah,
good at about grabbing that hook and popping it free. Are you
yeah.
using barbless hooks, or are you pretty much able
Um,
to kind of get it out of there?
well, yeah, majority like if it's a catch-all brand hook, I'll take the barb off because they're
Hmm.
pretty like they protrude pretty far. But
Yeah.
a BKK circle hook is what I recently moved into, and the barb is very very thin, and I haven't had any problems pulling it out through the barb or setting hooks on fish. So It's
Yeah,
been going well.
that's cool. So are you getting like pretty much into the water with the fish, or like at what point do you feel comfortable to like where you're not so deep that you're putting yourself in a crappy situation, but you're not pulling them so far onto the sand that it could be
Yeah.
detrimental to the fish? It's like
Well,
that's always the part for me. It's like you gotta like find that
yeah.
happy medium.
That would I guess that's where the tide pools of Georgia come into play.
Mm.
Majority of the fish that we do catch, we do get into a tide pool where even if they can slip out of your hands or grip or whatever, they can't really leave where you're at. So you have full control, and the fish does stay in relatively at least like a foot or 2 foot of water at all times. But if it's a small fish like a little black tip or a sandbar, you can't really see them in the water because it's so dirty. So oftentimes we do drag them like into the surf where we can actually work with the fish.
Yeah,
Um, not majority of the time though.
I get a little more bothered by how crazy the black tips can be anyway. I'm almost be more
Yeah,
nervous around the small ones than well, I've never caught a big shark. The biggest is like, I don't know, an 8 foot lemon shark, which they're
yeah,
pretty easy to contend with anyway. They
yeah.
seem like a pretty docile fish, but like black tips. It's kind of funny. Like, you talk about fish handling, man, dude, it was this guy, David Rocca, if he's listening, shout out to him. But I was fishing with him. So I caught the thing on a popper. Well, we were using treble hooks. So, God, you talk about hell getting the hooks out of this
Oh
thing's
man.
face. So, we got two big treble hooks, and we're on a jetty, and we landed it on the jetty. And then like we're like 8 feet up. So I had to like rappel down into these rocks with a squirrely black tip that's slinging treble hooks everywhere. So you're right. It's not for the faint of heart. Like if you're afraid to go hands on with something, it's just not the game to be
Right.
involved in. But I grabbed the damn thing by
Right.
the head, pushed it against the rocks. It was like in between my legs, kind of a delicate situation between my legs. I was like holding him against the rocks and trying to get that out. But
Yeah.
not against the rocks, but like,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
the fish,
You got to have some pressure on the fish.
yeah, the fish made off just fine for anybody
Yeah.
listening, but it's like, wouldn't recommend. I don't know if I went and specifically tried to catch those black tips, it wouldn't be with no treble hooks. That was awful.
Yeah.
But,
Right.
but yeah, that's cool. I can relate to that with, the way, and it's the same thing like what we do with the Goliaths. Like, you can't bring them onto the beach. Like you can't bring them up onto the sand. You got to stay in the water. But they don't say how much water.
Yeah.
But I know I had a time where I was doing it solo one night, and I was in too deep of water. I was in like thigh deep water, and this thing managed to flip over like right side up, and it got moving, and the leader had found its way like around my leg. The damn thing starts swimming and like pulling me. I was like, oh my God. So you got to be smart with yourself as much as trying to, help the fish out. But yeah, so well now so we're talking about the spinning gear, and that's like your rig for that. But like how about like your conventional gear? Is it kind of like is your from spool to hook setup pretty much the same, just on a bigger scale, or what?
Yeah, it's I run an Avet 130,
Mm-hmm.
and I'd use about a 30-foot rig. And mainly because I would use such a long rig is because I was in a tournament a few years ago which wouldn't allow the help of somebody that wasn't on your team. And being that I'm from Georgia, I can't often fish with people who were on my team. So I was making long rigs, and when the fish would approach to where I can grab my leader, I'd drop my reel out of gear and I would grab the leader and work with it by myself. But yeah, pretty much it's just braid, 200-pound to the end of the spool, and then about 100 to 150 yards of either 180 or 250 mono. I guess it just depends how thick the black tips are down in Florida that weekend.
Right. Yeah. Were you so you're kind of doing that by yourself? Are you paddling your baits out all by yourself and just kind of leaving your gear on the beach behind you, or?
Well, sometimes I would even have to get a bystander and like run them down
Yeah.
on how to use the reel. But majority of the time, I did have somebody with me that knew what they were doing. It's just you always got to be prepared for whatever, So if I was gonna be by myself on the beach, because the guys in Florida, they would go to their houses at the end of the night, but I would sleep on the beach by myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of why I kept myself prepared to deal with whatever I needed to. Luckily, I didn't ever have to catch a giant hammerhead by myself, but I did
Yeah.
deal with some pretty nice fish, up to 10, maybe 11 foot by myself.
Oh wow. So you probably get pretty good at getting them out of there quick by yourself. Uh, yeah, that's always my fear. Like if I go out and do this stuff by myself, whether it's the sharks or the Goliaths, I'm always like, I'm paddling out in the darkness. I'm like, man, my $1,500 setup better still be on the beach when I get back. I was like, I get worried there's going to be like, I don't know, some kind of knot in the reel that's going to tip me over. I've
Oh
only had it
man,
happen. I've only had it happen once where something went awry while I was paddling out, and I was paddling and realizing I wasn't going. I was like, okay, well, shit. Like I know what happened, but maybe with the Goliaths, it's a little bit more of a risk because like if they grab your bait on the paddle in, you just lost everything because they're right there in the
yeah.
they're right there in the snags. I had a guy run over my line. I had a boater come by and pick my line up when I was paddling out one time. That sucked.
Mm.
So, I don't know if you've had any
Yeah.
any horror stories on paddle outs.
Yep. Actually, it was on St. Simon's. It was at nighttime, and I was maybe getting 200 yards out where a guy came cutting through, right near the beach, and I went from paddling my bait to pretty much converted to riding skis behind this boat, except I was sitting in a kayak.
Oh
And
hell no!
yeah, he actually drug me. I let go of my paddle because I had to use two hands to pull slack in my line and get my hook out from the handle of my kayak. So I
Mhm.
did that, and my bait just goes flying with the boat, and I flipped out of the kayak, and I couldn't make it to my paddle, and so I just had to like use my hands to make it back to the beach. And my buddies and my brother were on the beach as well, and they had no idea what was going on.
Damn. Yeah. See, I
So
had a
you gotta be safe. I didn't have a life jacket, and ever since then, I will
yeah.
always wear a life jacket.
Yeah, I do the life jacket thing, no doubt. I've
Yeah.
fallen out only once. Now, it wasn't even during a paddle out. I was like during the most boneheaded thing ever. But yeah, when it happened with me, I saw the boat coming, and like I was paddling towards a bridge because I was gonna drop for Goliaths, and the actual the pass through point on the bridge was ahead of me, but I see this boat turn like he was gonna cut in behind me. So it's like, oh
Mm.
shit. So I had time to I just threw the rig over and hoped that it was going to get down, but I threw it over and then he ran through, and then on my paddle back in, I heard my drag screaming. I was like, no, but
Yep, he got you.
he went through the bridge, so once it got to the braid, it pretty much just broke it off. But poor guy
Yeah.
probably had 200 yards of 200-pound mono and 1,000-pound leader in his prop.
Oh yeah, that's a
I mean,
lot of
there's
untying.
no way that prop didn't get destroyed by that rig.
Yeah,
But
that was a
yeah.
rebuild.
And then I had the only time I've fallen out was I had hooked up with a shark. This was in the Panhandle somewhere in Florida. And it got me around some kind of underwater structure out on the beach. I'm like, what the
Oh
hell
my
did it get
god.
under? Yeah, it was snagged. So I'm fighting this fish, and then all of a sudden I could feel that it's stuck on something. And then all of a sudden I just feel it's gone, but my rig is stuck. So then I just hopped in the kayak and reeled myself out to this, whatever it was, and I got over the top of it and started pulling, and then it broke free so abruptly that I rolled over. I'm sitting here like I'm
Wow.
a horrible swimmer too. and and I didn't have a life jacket on when that happened to me. I started wearing it after that, and I'm sitting here
Yep.
swimming with my rig and my rod and reel and trying to hop onto this damn kayak, and then I'm scared there's a shark down there somewhere. But yeah, I always wear mine now. I get too scared. I'm too much
You
of a
know what they
scaredy
say,
cat.
you learn the most from your screw ups.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Now the place that scared me was down in South. I was living in Corpus Christi for a while.
Cool.
But Jesus, you talk about some horrifying surf down there in that area. I only did that a couple of times. I'm like, man, I'm not doing this solo. It was too scary. That is some scary. I'm scared of the surf. And that place was brutal. So, and then I seen in your one picture the photo of the big sawfish. Now, was that Florida or were you getting that in Georgia? I've never
Yeah,
seen them up there.
that was down in Florida.
Okay.
It was a summer month actually, which was kind of surprising, and we were not fishing intercoastal. That was
Mhm.
shoreline So that was spooked. FWC was on the beach for that fish.
Oh, that's
So
interesting. Like standing beside you.
yeah, they had their phone out recording the entire process. That's actually where most of the pictures came from, was that.
That's
And
funny.
I had a rope in my hand for like the first half of a GoPro video and I saw the two dorsals and I was thinking, this was during the tournament, by the way. So we were gonna tape measure the fish and get a good picture for the tournament.
Yeah.
And I see the two fins thinking it's a lemon shark,
Yeah. Big lemon.
but
Yep.
and then I saw the saw come out like facing me. And so I immediately threw the rope onto the beach and got my bolt cutters out.
Yeah, because I know they get weird. It's like you're fine until you put like a rope on its tail. Now you're in possession of the fish.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a weird one. Well, that
Yeah.
sucks because that's sort of like one of those like guilty. I don't know what you want to call it. One of those fish everybody wants to catch, but you
Right.
can't catch.
Yeah.
But
Well, I tell everybody that when they say they want to catch one, I just tell them like, no, you don't. Like
right.
you don't want to do it. It's a stress to deal with. The
Yeah.
leader's gonna wrap in its bill.
Yep.
It's a stress.
Because that was the other thing. It's like good. I mean, all the photos I've seen, the ones people catch, it's always wrapped up in that bill. It's like, how the hell did you get in there?
Yeah,
So,
a rostrum type deal.
yeah, the rostrum, whatever you want to call it. It's
Yeah,
another one where I'd be
thing.
more. That's another one where I'd be more worried about the small ones than the big ones. But
Right.
yeah, well, I'm sure FWC was paying close, keen attention. I'd have
Yeah.
been telling them, coach me through exactly what you want right now. Like, how do you
Well,
want to do this?
I didn't know he was FWC until afterwards. He came up to me and airdropped me the whole video he took, and he thanked me for dealing with the fish properly.
Yeah.
I got his information, and he called me a few days later to follow up with like what bait I was using, how long we were on the beach,
Sure.
and just a questionnaire. Just
Was
he
he
already
law
saw-
enforcement or was he just like one of the fisheries scientist conservation-y type of people with a clipboard?
I actually don't know. He didn't have a clipboard or anything. He wasn't in uniform, but he was on the beach recording us. And later on, I did get a call from him with the Florida Wildlife Commissions. So I'm guessing that he was legit.
They're probably just more interested in gathering that data. I've never found those guys to be that difficult to deal with. They've always been cool every time I've come up on them. So they seem like they got their stuff pretty squared away. They're all pretty good dudes. I had one time similar where I was catching the sandbar sharks, and it's the same thing. They're federally protected, but I had two FWC guys come up on me one night when I was fishing solo for them, and they were taking pictures, and they took my pictures for me. But then they just left. They didn't even ask for my license. They asked for nothing. They just went away. All right. That was interesting. That was all right.
Yeah, I've seen a Georgia DNR is a lot more strict than the Florida commissions are for sure.
Yeah. It's probably case by case. I think if you I feel like it's the younger, newer ones that are maybe a little more, I don't know. I get that line of thought. I did the law enforcement thing myself for a few years, and it's like, when you're a rookie, you want to arrest everything that moves, but maybe it's the same with those guys, but I never had issues. I always thought they're all pretty good guys. So now I see, I saw that do you have your own guide service, or are you working with another outfit? I mean, tell me a little bit about that side of it. Always seems pretty cool to me, like that when you're taking other people out. I mean, what's kind of like your shtick? Is it like an educational type experience? I mean, what's your client base like?
So actually one of my closest buddies, or I guess one of my secondhand men out there on the beach, his name is Nico. And he is a beach service rental. So he rents out like kayaks and bikes and sets up beach chairs for people on St. Simon's. And one day he just had some family ask him if they could, go fishing with him. So we took him fishing, and they gave us a pretty hefty tip at the end of the night. And we don't really advertise like full-time charters. I don't have a set price. It's more so if a family wants to go out there real bad while they're in town on vacation, then they're liable to come. And if they feel comfortable tipping us, if we have a good night, they can. Like usually if we don't catch a fish, I would take somebody out again without even any kind of charge or anything, because it's more about seeing what kind of fish are in the water here because we
Yeah.
have a big population of swimmers. Big. There are a lot of people that come here and swim
Hmm.
not knowing that these massive fish are eating casted baits in 5 foot of water.
Right. Yeah, I feel like I saw that even more. I don't know. You really only do it at nighttime in Florida, but like South Carolina is the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
And just, yeah, I mean, all the beaches are just loaded with people, and they have just completely oblivious to what's out
Yeah.
there. So that's pretty cool. But I mean, the kind of people that are coming with you, are they like well-seasoned anglers? Are they just like vacationing and never caught a fish in their life, or is it like a little bit
Yeah.
of
It's
everything in between?
it's usually people with their children who have never seen a fish before. And we don't really if it's a family with children, we don't really go out there to target like giant fish. We'll keep
Right.
our rod numbers small and our bait smaller type deal. Most of them will be happy catching one of those southern stingrays or a 3 foot
Mhm.
blacktip. So it's not all about putting everything we can out with the charter. It's more or less just showing them and teaching them that there are fish in these waters that you've never seen before and you would love to see.
Yeah. Yeah, you can make a kid's whole day and whole like a year catching a 3 or 4 foot
Yeah,
black tip. I mean,
definitely.
I was the same way when I was young, and even to a point, I almost liked catching the stingray more than anything, which is probably people are like, what?
They
But
fight pretty hard.
the really really big southern stingray, well, it's like the fight is a miserable experience, but like it makes for a cool photo, so it's sort of like worth it in
Yeah,
the end. But yeah, that's pretty funny. But so I know the big thing with like the sharks is sort of like, I think the battle is just like making sure you preserving the sport, because it's like we're kind of
that's right.
exist in a day and age where that pastime's getting like more and more persecuted. And
Right.
a lot of blame is cast upon anglers for like if there's a shark attack in an area. We'll shut down fishing, keep baits out of the water. We're attracting fish, and you see certain states and or certain like sections of beach that are getting like to where it's being outlawed. Just from your perspective, like what do you think like guys can do to like preserve what they're to be more smart with it,
Yeah.
or knock down certain like misconceptions about it? I mean, what can people do to try to prevent these shutdowns from happening, if
Right.
anything?
So there would be two different answers for this, but we'll stick with Georgia because that's where I have most of my experience at. The people fishing the piers, and in the last 2 years, we've had a population of greater hammerheads come through,
Mm,
which wasn't known to us for the longest. And a lot of people don't know this about Georgia, but you are allowed to kill hammerheads and tiger sharks in the state. And so they feel like using the senators, the weak reels, drifting your bait several hundred yards away from the piers and heavy current, and netting these fish or grabbing the leader and bringing them to the rocks is okay to do because it's legal. But what they don't know is we're only a few wash ups of Florida regulated fish dying to put us in the same position. So
right.
I think the biggest thing is our local fishermen on the piers need to not net the fish if it's going to be a fish that is federally protected, like the sandbars or the hammerheads that are regulated in pretty much every other state, or tiger sharks, which they still do to this day. They're getting netted and pulled up onto the piers, which is procrastination. It's what they tell you in FWC's permit test is to not procrastinate your
Hmm.
release times, and that's exactly what the peers here are doing is procrastination.
So at the point that they get up to the pier, what's the proper like course of action? I don't know if they can really get down to the leader
So yeah,
necessarily. You
so
walk
if
it
it's
down
a
to the beach, or
yeah, it's like a T-shaped pier. You can look on like Google Images and see, and it's probably you got to go around a lot of pylons and like concrete platform. So it's gonna like let's just say you were to hook into even just small 10-foot hammerhead, it's gonna take an additional 15 to 20 minutes to get this fish to the rocks, which the water doesn't have beach showing at high tide. It's only rocks and like
yeah.
a few feet of water, and so pretty much the first hammerhead that does successfully get brought to those rocks, I believe it will wash up or die. And if they it's small enough to get into the net and they even pull it out of the water for a picture, the attraction from the tourist at the pier or just social media in general will be enough to pose regulations on the state of Georgia for those fish.
Yeah, I know that's especially the danger with social media is like when people
Yeah.
gather. I've had it happen with me with black tips. I think it's like anytime if you're out there in daytime on a beach and you got big gear and it's bowed over and you're toughing and puffing and you're clearly fighting something.
Yeah.
It's like the crowd's a symbol. And man,
Hmm.
it's just like anything on the news. Like you can paint a picture and a narrative behind a camera on what's happening and make it look really, really bad if you're not careful with what you're doing. And then people posting it on the news and putting it all over Facebook. So I know it's gotten to a point like I really won't even do it until after dark for the most usually more so because there's just too many people in the water. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's like one of those things where at the same time it's like I don't know if you're doing the sharks any more of a service by just being like only going out in the darkness of the night and not letting the world know what you're doing. You know, I don't know if that's really any more constructive. I think you're
Right.
stalemating things, but it's like
Yeah.
I don't know, it's like it seems like a hard thing to get proper stewardship for to get out there and be actually like educating people. But
I think the big crowds of people isn't necessarily a harm to shark fishing. I think it's more so what they see. So you can
yeah,
have a big crowd, but if the big crowd is all recording videos and you do release the fish properly, keep it in the water and do it fast, then it's going to look great on social media views. Otherwise, let's say the crowd sees you dry beach a sandbar where it's bleeding, struggling to get the
mhm,
hook out type deal. It's going to look really really bad on all of the shark fishing community of Georgia.
right. Yeah, well, I think the same even goes for illegal harvest of the sharks. There was
Yeah.
one that went pretty viral. I think it was here in Florida. I don't remember where it was. They were like lawfully and legally harvesting like a black tip. You know, and the dudes are like smashing it on the head with a hammer,
I saw that.
laughing about it, acting crazy. I'm like, you idiot. Like
Yep.
what you're doing is within law. You got to be smarter and realizing how you might be affecting, I don't know, other people. So that's a really good point. I like the way you say that. It's better to not just hide from everybody. It's almost better to, I don't know, invite the opportunity to educate the people
Yeah.
or be a good example of how you're supposed to do it. So
Right.
yeah, that's a good point. I guess I'm curious too. It's like you do the shark fishing thing, and it's like I don't know. I'm like, do you do any other kind of fishing, like maybe during the off seasons or where things are difficult? Like you branched out into any other kind of? You got any other thing, or is there pretty much your heart is tied to these sharks?
I mean, I do love sharks. I do want to catch every species that I possibly can with a cast.
Yeah.
But tarpon and redfish, black drum, we get a big migration of black drum here in about 2 weeks, and some of them get up to like 60 or 70 pounds. So soon here I'll be stocking up on buckets of blue crabs and getting ready to hit the jetties and the pylons.
Yeah, yeah. I should have mentioned that. I saw some of your photos of the black drum, big old
Yeah.
gargoyle looking fish.
Yeah, we get some big ones here.
Yeah. Now, are you making your own rigs at this point, or do you got like a resource where you're buying? I don't imagine maybe you're buying pre-assembled rigs, but I
Well,
think
I do make my own, yeah. But the supplies that I get would be from Adam Strukel at Apex Onshore. I feel like I have to give him a shout out.
yeah,
Me and Adam kind of started learning South Florida hammerhead fishing together, and really came a long way, especially with his tackle company. And so he gets like wholesale, and I would just get it from him to support his company, and then I'd make my own rigs with his material.
right. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So, how often are you coming down to Florida? Like, I mean, you're in Georgia, but are you traveling like? Have you gone above Georgia up north, or are you staying
Um,
mostly at home or down south?
I have gone north, but it's not really it's a big learning curve compared to South because I kind of grew up going to Florida and Georgia just for family and vacation or whatever. So it was easier to pick up and a lot shorter of a drive. So I do I have a good bit of knowledge at least I think in Florida for the migrations and the right time of year to catch a certain species. Like I haven't caught a tarpon yet, although I've missed way more than I can count on my hands.
I'm in the
Um,
same boat.
yeah,
I've only caught the baby ones. The big ones
yeah,
just
they're
whoop my
tough,
tail.
very
Uh,
tough.
I think it was within the first week that I moved to Florida. I moved here from Arkansas, so I mean, I grew up around the coast in South Carolina, but I was in Arkansas. Man, I was ready to get out of there.
Yeah.
Sheesh. So like within the
Um,
first week of coming here, I'd hit the beaches. I think I was out there trying to catch snook from the surf, and there's a group of
yeah.
land based shark guys, and they caught a big old tarpon right in front of me. I was like, oh my gosh, this happens
Wow.
all the time. But
Yeah.
hadn't happened for me yet. I've lost a few of them same way. I've lost a few of them in the rivers around here, but and then like we went and did the thing in like Boca Grande Pass, and I don't know, man, that style of fishing just wasn't for me. Like in the boats in the pass, other boats all around you. I was like, I don't know,
Um,
not really for me.
it, if you don't mind, I would kind of like to jump backwards a little bit to the Shark Smart and then the right gear usage in South Florida as
Yeah,
well.
because that's important.
I'm
Yeah.
not actually a local of South Florida, but I feel like I have enough experience down there to speak on it. You see a lot in the group chats. People want to use cheap reels such as like pin squalls and senators, especially for kayaking baits in Florida. And these guys uh, pretty frequently are new to the game, and they
Mhm.
see like pictures of big hammerheads. They know that the senator has a lot of line, and they'll go down there. And if they do manage to hook into one of these giant feeding hammerheads, they don't know what they're in for. And a lot of people make a big deal about how the fish would die because the reel doesn't have enough drag. And I guess they're more or less speaking of my occurrence. I was one of those guys that was blind to the drag usage. I had a hammerhead die on me. I had to do the dirty work. I had to dispose the fish because I was using a senator. And I quickly realized that night that I will never use a reel that's below par. And so I see it a lot in group chats, specifically for land-based shark fishing. People go into Florida with low gear and or weak gear, I should say. And I try to correct them on that. And a lot of people think I just kind of come off as an a-hole, but without actually saying like, hey, I was that guy. I killed a giant hammerhead. It kind of makes you sound bad. It's not something I ever bragged about, but it's something that I really want to make sure it gets out there. Like people need
Yeah.
to understand that you need to start small. Use your surf gear, use your spinning reels, work your way up from the 3-footers to the 5-footers to the 8s and 9s before you just see a cool picture, grab the cheapest big capacity conventional reel you can buy and storm down to Florida to catch a fish you're not ready for.
Yeah, because that was another kind of direction I wanted to go with this is like the graduation up to that level is
Yeah.
when you see that I had a big senator for a while. No, I never had an opportunity to hook into a giant fish. I was catching bull sharks and lemons with it.
Yeah.
But I've seen that too, and it's like you see that, and I think people mean well, but it's like it's at some point it's almost like you leapfrog over that
Yeah.
insufficient gear, and like you go from like kind of like I don't know low level gear to like extremely high level gear, and there's not much of no, there's not much room for
Yeah.
the middle zone. All I have is like I've got a Tiagra 80 wide and then I got like a 50 wide, but I try to stay away from even with that. I try to stay away from putting something
Yeah.
out there that could potentially get picked up. But you also like, man, it's just hard to know what's going to pick it up.
That's right.
So it's either that or you're the guy that's catching black tips with a
And
excessively powerful reel. It's like, okay, well,
right.
damned
And
if you do, don't, damned if you don't. So
yeah. I guess that would be the confusing part for like newer guys is how
yeah.
they do really want to catch a big hammerhead. That's kind of like the pinnacle of shark fishing on the Atlantic coast. But so even if they do have the funds to go buy a big Avid 80 wide or Tiagra or something, they might not necessarily have the experience of working with a fish that is at risk of dying after even a 20-minute fight. So I mean, I guess what I can say is surf gear and spinning rods and shallow water and small baits really works your experience up, not only just your knowledge of what gear to use, which is really important in today's time with social media, is people need to have the experience and not just the right gear.
Yeah. I guess if you get exponentially good at handling smaller sharks, I don't know, between the 5 to 7 foot range.
Right.
that's probably better to build off of that, so you know what you're doing when the big
Yeah.
ones come along. So
Yeah.
yeah, and that, and like honestly, like where I'm at, I don't know, I'm smart enough to know like I wouldn't even attempt to go do that without like I'm gonna reach out to some of like the information
Yes.
resources and the guys that I know and be like, hey, let me tag along. Let me,
Yeah.
I'll bring some bait. I'll do, whatever to contribute to it. But,
Yeah.
I don't think you're right. It's good. That's what kind of one of the big things I wanted to bring up with you is, a lot of guys I think want to do this. Like there's
Yeah.
the allure of catching a big shark is like a timeless thing.
Yeah.
What you get out of that. But it's like I think people just don't know where to start or where to begin.
Yeah.
So
And going in the group chats and asking people to fish with you when you don't really have a big fish under your belt or name, people are hesitant to fish with you. When
yeah,
I think I encourage the new guys to fish with experienced people. And if I'm friends with experienced people, I encourage them to fish with the new guys because, I mean, how else are they going to learn and
yeah,
know to do right without learning from somebody else, you know?
right. Yeah, that's a good point. I was kind of curious too. I mean, this is sort of like all offhanded, and I don't know, subjective and opinion based stuff. But like, now
Yeah.
you're seeing more people that they don't have the person to go with, and you're seeing more people sending baits out with drones or those little RC boats. Like, what is your thought around that? Like the bait deployment tricks.
I guess it would lapse back to me saying I'm more of a realist. There are risks that come with kayaking baits. If you, I feel like it kind of falls hand in hand. If you're afraid to get into a kayak, then you're also afraid to get down and dirty into the water with a
Yeah,
fish that you cannot beach. Now let's say like older guys and retired guys or people with injuries, if they're going to use a drone or a boat because they're incapable of kayaking, then they should definitely have a crew of guys who can do things the right way or get their hands dirty.
yeah,
Majority of the time, the people are using those technologies because they're afraid to get in the water, which is understandable. Kayaking is a scary thing to do. It's not something that you enjoy doing. I mean, I do, but if it's a rough surf and you see the dark night, you're thinking to yourself, "I'm gonna die out here."
yeah,
It's and a lot of people are hesitant to do it. And now that we have technology, it's making it way easier for people to get in to the parts of Florida and fish for fish that you're going to need a lot of hands and a lot of experience to release successfully.
yeah. Because my concern with those boats was more like, or the RC boats or the drones too, was like in the off chance or those scenarios where the fish makes it around like a channel marker or makes it around something. Like you
Yeah.
do not have the option now to get out there in the kayak
Right.
and free the fish. It's like that's
Yeah.
that's not there. It's like you're sort of at the mercy of, if they get around something. But it's cool stuff. I mean, I'd
Yeah.
be lying if I didn't say I didn't look at some of those aqua cats myself. Like those nice boats that can like drive
Yeah.
through hell. I'm like, man, that'd be pretty legit. But then for me, it's the price tag. I'm like, I
Yeah.
can't
I
get.
feel like if I had one, I would lose it the first night I
Yes,
used it. I
I
had
know I
a
would,
go
especially
fish.
the drone. That drone for me, it's going down. Like I'm destined to
Um,
ruin that.
this made me think of just the tiger shark my girlfriend just caught. I had my spinning reel with a 5 foot like heavy jig rod, and I had a go fish cam that she bought me for Christmas
Hmm.
rigged onto the cable so we could see the fish eat the bait. So I took
Oh,
the
that's
bait.
cool.
Yeah, I took the bait just past the sandbar. The line's kind of going into that trough zone in South Florida. And when we released the tiger shark, it swam directly into the braid, and I lost my camera the first time I used it. So me and technology just don't work well together. I think I'm gonna stay away from the drones and the boats.
Dude, I'm the same way. I don't know what it is about me. I beat my gear to hell. Whatever can go wrong does. So I've gotten to a point now where I'm almost too afraid to buy nice things. So like, dude, I've been like fishing for long enough. But if you like went into my garage and saw my like pathetic like gear setup, like I don't know, I'm kind of proud of it though. I'm like I've actually managed to do a lot with very little. I've got them like the most pathetic like assortment of gear that you've ever seen. I'm like, dude, it doesn't survive. My rods break, everything fails, but I guess that's a good topic too, though. Just one thing to gloss over, because you're doing a style of fishing where it's expensive stuff. It's expensive. There's no way around it. Like you're being unreasonable if you're not getting good gear at some point with when you graduating up to those high level sharks. But what is how are you maintaining and taking care of the hardware? Like, you're getting salt, you're getting sand, you're getting all kinds of crap in your gear. Are you on top of it when it comes to cleaning and
yeah,
rust prevention?
I think this is probably one of my favorite topics we brought up. My friends sometimes get upset with me when we leave the beach at how long it takes me to spray off my cart, bed of my truck, reels. I mean, I'll take my spools off, my drag caps. I make sure that my gear has no sand laying inside of it.
Yeah.
And I can't tell you how many nights my girlfriend has just been telling me to come on and hurry up. Like I'll pull out the water hose and I can just see the look on her face, like, here we go.
Yeah.
It's important though. If you want gear to last and catch fish for a long time, you need to tend to it.
Yeah, big time. Because I know I've had those late nights where I get home and you pull up to the garage door and pull all your gear up and line it up. It's like, man, that comfortable bed is calling me right now.
Yeah,
I'll wash it in the morning, but it's just you can't really afford to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's pretty funny. Yeah, I think you've covered a lot of the good stuff. Is there anything you're way more well versed in this world than me? So I know that in the back of your mind there's certain topics that are really important and things that need to be said. And I'm kind of I'm doing my best to try to draw out the things that I think are important.
Yeah.
But I mean, I'm just not in that shark world. But I know it's a really important topic, and it's a culture of fishing that's it sort of exists in the shadows. In some weird way.
I think,
as corny as that sounds, it's
I mean, you're right. You're right.
But is there anything that you feel like needs to be covered that maybe I didn't bring up? I'm trying to think of the smart stuff. I mean, it's heavily conservation related.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of the name of the game with those fish. But
I think you did bring up most of the important points. But I guess if I can add anything, it would be that anglers, whether they're experienced or not, they need to understand that social media has a bigger impact on shark fishing than anything else does in nowadays. So even a picture of a 5-foot sandbar with all of its gills showing out of the water, it looks bad on the sport. And so many things that I see on Facebook and group chats, or even just conversations that don't include pictures, just kind of show the carelessness that a lot of anglers have nowadays. And it's okay to do things your own way. Not everybody's going to do everything right, but it's what is seen. So I think people need to be a little more precautious with where they take their pictures, with the fish, where the fish is, how it looks. And the sport isn't just about pictures, even though majority of newcomers think that it is, and that's why they come into it. Is it's not that important. The way the fish is treated and publicly viewed is what really matters in this sport nowadays.
Yeah.
And it's not so much about the pictures. Like back in the 70s and 80s, the guys down in South Beach Pier were killing these fish, and it looked awesome. It still looks awesome. I wish times were the same. But unfortunately, it's not. And if we want our kids to shark fish from the land, then the vast population of shark fishermen need to make changes in the way they post and publicize things.
Yeah, that's a really good message with the social media thing. That's like a double-edged sword too, because it's the best way to magnify everything that's being done wrong, but it's also the best way nowadays to get good, proper information. So I guess beforehand there really weren't those information resources. I remember that the forum days, and I remember poking around a decade ago on Texas. What is it? TexasSharkFishing.com. That was a big one. That was a really big site there for a while. I think that's what it was. And you could get some information there. But you're right. It's social media can expose the stupidity really bad.
Yeah.
But it's also a great place to get involved with any of the online groups.
Yeah.
Every now and then you'll stumble across one of the well-managed groups on Facebook or whatever, where it's the moderators or the webmasters or whatever you want to call them do a good job of vetting out dumb stuff and protecting like the sanctity of the page. So it's like, well, it's also the best place to get information and to learn. So you're right. I guess that's an interesting topic, is like the picture taking thing. Like you want to catch that moment, but it's way harder to do it if you're by yourself. Like, I don't know if you really can't. You almost can't unless you've got a tripod set up on video mode.
I have a lot of pictures on my phone where I fish on Jekyll by myself, maybe more than I do with people, even my girlfriend. And so what I've come to do is I'll take my foot, which I know is about 11 inches long, and I'll set it like just over the nose, and I'll take a picture overhead so I can show size reference. But I also, my rod tip's in the truck right now, but I have tape starting from the butt of my rod with the first piece of tape at 5 foot, and then every 12 inches to the tip of my pole at 12. So it takes away the time of pulling a tape measure out of your bag, getting it on the fish, pulling the fish straight. Like if you're by yourself, you need to have little tips and tricks, I guess, to speed up your release game, and
you
get data for yourself.
Yep. You got to have a system in place. I know I gotten to a point now where it's like I'll have a camera on a tripod, like between the rod holders and all my gear for landing, either in a bag. Like I wear a backpack a lot, like a dry bag. But it's like, for you, like how often are you having to chase these fish down the beach? Or are you staying planted feet and like they're coming to in front of your spread of your rods?
Well, sometimes you can see like mullet and stuff, and like if you know the tides of the island, then you have a specific spot to fish that certain tide. And frequently, if you key in on your own little spot, you'll find bait there every time. And sometimes you'll see the dorsals of fish eating the bait. So like there was this one day, me and my buddy who got me into it a long time ago, were on the beach cast netting mullet, and we saw a school of tigers come through. And I mean, they were right off the beach. Oh, that's crazy. And we sight casted a bait right in front of them and caught like the tiniest little 5 foot tiger. And it was so pretty looking. And I think that really was one of the first, I guess, special fish we caught on Jekyll. And it really opened our eyes. Like we have an extraordinary fishery here where stuff like this isn't happening anywhere else on the Atlantic coast.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. And I'd always kind of wondered how people manage to pull it off if they're by themselves. It's like, I mean, like when you've hooked up with the fish, I didn't know if you're pretty much chasing the fish because they're pulling you down the beach, or if you're staying put. No, I mean you're still expanding on good stuff. So if it's an incoming current, the fish will oftentimes try to fight against it. And if you hook into a fish on the incoming and it goes with the current, it's like a key indicator that it's probably a smaller bodied fish that is using the current to its advantage to fight longer. Yeah.
But the larger fish, they tend to go against it, and against it they will go. Like they will pull you completely around the bend of the island. I think that we had done the Google Earth measurement with that one tiger shark, I guess is a good example, is where me and my buddy started at a point on the island and ended up going about a mile to the right and then back to where we started and then a mile to the left, which it might have seemed like a long fight for a spinning reel, but we're using a lot of drag and the rod tip was pretty much straight towards the water, which is where that Top Shot mono came into play. The fish made about a 200-yard run and stayed stationary at that 200-yard range, and just kind of went back and forth for about 40 minutes or so before we landed it.
Oh, that's pretty awesome. Yeah, I know. It's at some point you just got to be smart with the photo thing, obviously, and kind of read the situation for if you can even get that done. Because I know, like I was mentioning earlier, that even that black tip on the jetty, there was just no way to do it. It wasn't worth the photo. I'm down there in the rocks. Photo's gonna look like crap anyway. Right. And I'm having to try to get these damn treble hooks out of its face. So there's nothing to show for that whole experience, but actually a pretty entertaining story. And I mean,
I am a firm
it's a
believer
black
that,
tip anyway, so I've caught plenty of them.
like if anglers are going to be in the sport and posting for not just like the publicity, but more like bragging rights to other anglers, like let's say somebody catches a lemon shark that could be 11 foot, then I would support them pulling the fish up and getting a clear picture with a tape measure pulled, because you're dealing with a fish that has never been documented before. So in some circumstances, I believe it wouldn't be okay, but understandable to deal with a fish improperly. But 99% of the time, you're not gonna want to do everything you can for a picture, and sometimes it's ideal to just get the fish back in the water and let it go.
Yeah, a lot of times I think it's almost as easy to just take a video and hope for some good still frames.
Yeah, right.
Especially when you're by yourself. Yeah, or GoPro. Yeah, but well, that's awesome, dude. You definitely you brought a lot of good stuff to light that hadn't even been brought up yet with even some of the other guys that I've had on here with shark stuff, because it's like, I know the tone of that conversation's like, it's fun to talk about how like badass a big shark is and like how cool it is, but I know it's also one of those things where it's like it's so abundantly full of misconceptions and lies and falsehoods and things that need to be fixed. It's like really a responsible nature of the conversation needs to be centered more around that than like I can't help myself tying in how awesome a giant tiger shark and a spin gear is, but you got to supplement that with like proper fish handling skills and reasonable things. So I know that's big with that group of guys, but I know people listening to this are going to want to see the photos of the tiger shark and all that stuff on spin gear, and I can put it up on here. Okay. But the folks that want like the instant gratification and things like that, like where can they go to find your photos? So like I don't know, like your Instagram or wherever they can find you, or like the name of your guide service if they'd be like, man, I want to go with this guy, things like that.
So our Instagram would be dreamteam_LBSF. It stands for land-based shark fishing. I do have my own personal, but I feel like I would rather promote the group project more than just myself. And if anybody is an angler that is just willing to learn, I would never charge them a dime to come fishing with us. It's all about making sure the new guys understand how to start out the right way, because you don't have to have a TRX 80 wide or 130 to get out there and catch a simple 5-foot shark. And in most cases, it is okay to start out with a spinning reel and earn your way into catching smaller fish and getting used to it before you just jump into something you're not ready for.
Yeah, well, that's good, because I actually feel like I'm in the shoes of those kind of guys that are curious but on the outside looking in, and sometimes like for somebody like me, I'm always just wondering like who can I reach out to get information from. So you seem like one of those guys. I would encourage anybody that's like got it in their mind to maybe go try this, to you sound like a guy that's probably willing to give information or tips or whatever. So that's awesome. But any other kind of like final thoughts or anything we may have left out?
I don't think so. If you're in the state of Georgia and you're trying to catch a shark, feel free to give us a contact, and we will definitely do our best to get you on something.
That's awesome, man. I hope people reach out, and who knows, maybe I'll be passing through Georgia sometime. I'm always looking to expand my web of anglers who I can piggyback off of.
If Spencer
who I can freeload off of.
Spencer Wonder's watching this right now. I want to tell him that I helped him get the hammerhead. He needs to come to Georgia and catch lemons on cast with me. I've been asking him to come here and fish with me for years, and he just doesn't do it.
That dude gets around. You never know where that guy's at. I mean, geez Louise.
It's a special fishery, and I just know that he would love to add it to his books.
So much that he hasn't found time to get a damn haircut. Yeah. So, yeah, man. Anyway, I almost wonder if he just like snuck up with a set of clippers and shaved the beard and the hair off. Maybe he'll lose some of that fish power. It's like
I don't think I want to do that. That's his lucky charm. It has to be. That's the trick.
Oh yeah. Well, dude, I appreciate your time. That was awesome. I mean, some of the stuff you've caught, very envious of. I encourage anybody to go take a look at it. Just a lot of awesome fish. Humble guy, willing to share information, and we need more voices like that out there in the I don't know,
Yes, sir.
fishing ether. So I appreciate you using this little platform as the one to spread more good word on
Yes,
proper shark fish handling techniques and things like that. So
thanks for having me on,
appreciate
man. It was,
your time,
it was
dude.
awesome.
Yeah. Happy to have you on here. So,
Yes, sir.
Have a good one, man.
Yes, sir. You too.
Thank you for listening to the Boundless Pursuit podcast. If you enjoyed this show, your feedback, comments, and reviews are very important to me. Also, this podcast is just one element to a much bigger content outlet. I urge you to head over to www.haverodswilltravel.com, where you'll find audio, visual, and written editorial content. That is 3 dimensions of awesome fishing content brought to you by a very dynamic team of anglers. I hope that you'll tune in next week as we continue to build this program and have interesting and skilled anglers each Thursday. Thank you for listening.